Good morning.
Good morning. You may have heard us talking a little bit behind the scenes.
We were reminiscing about years ago when Casey and John White were doing Facebook Lives and coffee times and outside the walls.
Yeah. Things have come a long ways since then. And with things coming a long ways comes a lot more technological I guess room for technological error, which is why you guys snuck up on us this morning.
Yeah, right.
we must have missed the countdown going live. So anyway, good morning, happy Monday. Welcome to Coffee Time. My name is Casey,
and I am Mark.
Just in case you've not been with us before, it's good to have you. We're just plugging away through the Gospel of Luke right now, and about to finish up chapter 8. So we'll get there in just a little bit. If you have any prayer requests, we'd love to lift those up at the end of the show. And even if you're not watching live, feel free to drop those in the comments as well. But as we're going through our study, we love to interact with people live. And so if you have any insights or questions or observations, we'd love to hear from you. So drop them in the comments. So last week, I think the technical difficulties prevented us from I guess dual streaming to both YouTube and Facebook Live. And so we're back on both Facebook and YouTube Live this week. And so if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a shout out in the comments so we know it. It might be more difficult on YouTube to comment live than it is on Facebook.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we recognize that not everybody has one or the other of those platforms, and so we're happy to be able to do it on both live when we're able to. So hopefully there won't be technical difficulties going forward, and it'll be seamless, and you'll just have it available on both platforms forever and always in the future.
Yeah,
hopefully. So yeah, well, how'd your weekend go?
It was good. We had a lot of rain.
Yeah,
got wet.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting all that storm last night.
No, I wasn't either. Actually, I had when I was mowing my lawn earlier in the week, my lawnmower broke. I had a belt that broke on it, and so I got it fixed yesterday afternoon. And I'm thinking, okay, when I get home from church tonight, I'm gonna mow the lawn. Well, no, it stormed while we were in church, so there was no way that was gonna happen.
Yeah, we had a lot of branches down in our yard as well. Kind of came out of nowhere, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one to keep track of the radar. I'm pretty terrible at that. So I normally rely on others to tell me, and I guess I just wasn't paying attention to what other people were saying, or maybe other people weren't aware that it was going to be as bad.
I was watching the radar, and to me it looked like, oh, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, but there were some trees down. I think there was a tree down either across or at least part of Pecan Street, that runs right into our church property, and so just a lot of. I haven't heard of any property damage or anything like that, but definitely a lot of trees down.
One of our members I just heard this morning. The Holloways, I think they had some property damage from what I heard.
Yeah.
So they live a little outside of town.
Okay. Yeah, I figured there probably would be when you hear trees down, generally going to mess somebody up. But so prayers for the Holloways and their cleanup. But
I think the worst we got was when I left to come here this morning. My son's basketball was halfway in one of the sewer drains. So when I leave, I'm gonna have to tell him to go get that.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah, Sunday afternoon ended up being a beautiful afternoon, but it was like raining when we came into church and then raining when we left church Sunday night. But in between those times, it was beautiful sunshine. So it was kind of odd. It kind of reminded me of Florida weather. Like it'll be like stormy, and then the next minute it'll be sunshiny, and then it'll get stormy again later in the day. Normally in Arkansas, like if it's stormy, it's just kind of rainy all day, but
maybe a week.
Yeah. Yesterday was odd for sure. So
we had a baby dedication yesterday.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. So 10 families. I'm sure there were probably more babies born, but we were celebrating all the babies that were born last year.
Yeah.
And so we had 10 families that had kids that we celebrated.
Yeah. Sounds really good. Was that do you know if that part was live streamed?
I think it
That
was.
part of the service?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it
So
was.
if you want to see the video slideshow of that I believe Dennis put together. Yeah.
He was out of town yesterday, but yeah, he kind of organized it all.
Yeah. So if you want to go back and fast forward to that part of our stream yesterday, then you can see it on there. I'm not sure if we, kind of pull that part out and post it as a separate video. I don't know if we've done that in the past or not, but it's on the stream if you want to go and check it out. So it was neat having them all come up to the stage and have the elders pray over them. So always a good, always like that tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, let's turn to Luke, shall we?
Yeah.
Luke chapter 8 is where we are, and we're in the midst of some miraculous events that Jesus is performing. So, a couple of shows ago, we talked about Jesus calming the storm, showing his power over nature, and then last week we looked at Jesus healing a man with a demon, and so kind of his power over the spiritual realm. And so this week Jesus is returning from that side of the Sea of Galilee, the countryside of the Gerasenes, and so it seems like he went over there just for this one particular event, because when he gets back over, it's like people were waiting for him.
Yeah.
And so that's where we pick back up. Jesus is on his way back over across the sea, and so we pick up in verse 40.
Yep.
I believe it's your turn
It
to
is
read.
my turn to read.
All right.
So this is an interesting section, and I don't know if Luke does this anywhere else, but he kind of breaks into the middle of the story with another story, which I guess is what happened to Jesus.
Kind of a sandwich narrative.
Yeah. So I may go through verse 48. We'll talk for a minute, and then we'll continue to the end.
All right, sounds good.
So Luke chapter 8, beginning in verse 40. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out of me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace."
All right. So we see Jesus on the way to this man's house, who is called the ruler of the synagogue, which is an interesting description. Makes me wonder if he is a Pharisee.
I don't know. So I think the King James version says president of the synagogue. But from what I've read, he's kind of in charge of like the worship of the synagogue.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he would be a Pharisee or
I think it could be a Pharisee. I think rulers of the synagogue. What did you say the King James said? President of the synagogue. And so I think they found a lot of inscriptions with that title. And so I think it's not necessarily all synagogue rulers are Pharisees, but that doesn't exclude them from being a Pharisee. And so I say that to say it's possible that Jairus was a Pharisee, which would be an interesting, I guess, plot twist, because Jesus, has a lot of times, not always, because there's exceptions to that, like Nicodemus was a Pharisee, and he has a cordial interaction with Jesus. And so it's interesting in that a lot of times Jesus' interaction with the Pharisees is a negative one because of just their I don't know, toxic idea of who he is. And it seems like there's a lot of disputes between Jesus and the Pharisees, whereas instances like Nicodemus and potentially even Jairus here comes to him recognizing who he is in faith, asking for this to be done. And so I find that pretty fascinating.
I've wondered how being somebody of influence,
Mhm.
how much he had to kind of swallow his pride,
Oh yeah.
because I mean, it seemed like his daughter was really sick,
Yeah.
and so I wonder if it took him a while to finally give in and say, "Okay, I'm going to go to Jesus and ask for his help," because he fell at his feet, which is not very prideful at all. It's very humble
Right.
to fall at somebody's feet like that, pleading
Yeah.
in front of a crowd of people. On top of that,
Yeah.
so it seemed like he was pretty desperate.
Yeah. Yeah. They live in what has been coined an honor shame society, and that honor shame even had roots all the way down to the physicality of one's body. And so, the head would be considered the most honorable part of the body, which, kind of foreshadowing Jesus and the crown of thorns that is placed on his head. They're dishonoring the most honorable part of his body. But then also the feet would be considered the most dishonorable part of the body because they're dirty. They had sandals. They had to wash feet before they came in. Kind of this ritualistic cleansing. And so when it came to people's feet, it was considered unclean or a dishonorable part of the body, which speaks to different times where Jesus would wash the disciples' feet, or here whenever we see this ruler of the synagogue bowing down at the feet of Jesus, like you said. And so yeah, it's interesting that even if he wasn't a Pharisee, he would have been interacting with Pharisees on a regular basis. And, I'm sure that conversations of Jesus would have come up in these inner catacombs of the synagogue, of Pharisees coming in and out, maybe hearing about Jesus, the things that are getting stirred up because of Jesus. We kind of see that play out also after the healing of the woman with blood, because we see that he kind of has this messianic secret mentality. Don't go and tell no one. So no spoiler alert on the ending of Jairus' story here, but we kind of see that Jairus would have been one who probably, well, I would say he knew who Jesus was, because why else would he have come to him with this request? And so whether or not he had any direct interaction with him before this, we can't say for sure, but it is obvious that in his position as the synagogue ruler, he would have heard who this Jesus was, and for whatever reason had faith in him, which is fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he had heard all these things that Jesus was doing.
Yeah.
So something interesting, the daughter it says she was about 12 years old. And at that time in Eastern culture, she would have been almost marriage age, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's like she was about to start her life and everything. She was about to become an adult. And her dad was about to lose her right before she was going to be able to experience all that. And so it is sad to think about that.
And to being his only daughter.
Yeah.
Which might be the way that it's worded. I kind of always have read it as also only child.
I've wondered that too. Yeah,
it doesn't specify that, but it kind of, I guess there's an implication that it's possibly his only child. And so, but regardless, there's something special about this girl because it does use that language of only. And so she's young, hasn't even come of age yet, and she's in the process of dying. And so Jairus, maybe he, like the woman, just the text doesn't specify it, has tried everything, because the woman that has this hemorrhage, it says that she tried all the things. She went to all the physicians, spent all this money, and could not find any healing. It doesn't say that this had been attempted by Jairus, and maybe this was kind of a last resort effort, or if as soon as he figured out that she was dying, if he went straight to Jesus. It's not as clear with his story as it is with the woman next, but regardless, he goes to Jesus in this most dire time.
And then we will get back to that, to be continued.
Yeah.
But the woman, you were saying that she had tried all these things. one of the interesting things is, this story is found in the other synoptic gospels,
Mhm.
but the other, I think Mark, I don't know if Matthew does or not, but Mark says that she had tried to go to all these physicians and they
Mhm.
couldn't do anything about it. Luke does not say that she went to all these other physicians. And I was reading somewhere, somebody was saying, well, that's because Luke was trying to, he was a physician himself, so he didn't want to embarrass his physician friends, so he didn't
Ah.
add that to his gospel. I don't know if that's the case, but
Well, it does
seem kind
say
of
that she
interesting.
spent all her living on physicians
Oh, does it?
in verse
Oh,
43.
I think maybe the other ones say that
She
they
went to
weren't able,
multiple physicians.
and they
or-
weren't able to do
and they,
anything
oh,
about
okay.
it.
Okay, and they weren't able. So I guess Luke is like saying that without explicitly saying that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like she spent all her money on physicians. I'm just going to leave it at that. However, he does disclose she could not be healed by anyone. There at the end of verse 43, and so it does seem like he's trying to maybe I guess safeguard his profession.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it is interesting, which I don't know that I've ever noticed this before, or if I have, I just kind of forgot, kind of the interesting connection. But the girl was 12 years old, and this woman had this hemorrhage for 12 years.
I've wondered the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a connection or not, if it's a coincidence, but I've always told myself I'm going to research that one of these days, and I still haven't done it.
Yeah, but numbers are often important in
Mm.
scriptures, and the number 12 is an important number throughout the scriptures. You have the 12 tribes of Israel, you have the 12 apostles in the New Testament, and so you have this number of 12 being one of significance and kind of encompassing of God's people. You have the 24 elders around the throne of God in Revelation, and so this multiple of 12, and so it's interesting that it is brought up here back to back in these stories in this sandwich narrative of Jesus healing, the number 12 showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody has any insider observation on that, we'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on if it's just coincidence or if you've heard of some significance to it. That would be interesting to hear.
You know what? I just realized I haven't done a sound check, and we could have been talking this whole time. Okay. I just want to make sure there were no comments or anything. All right.
Let's do a quick sound check before we go any further.
Oh yeah. Okay.
All right. Good deal.
All right. We're good.
So we have not been muted this whole time. That's good to know.
So, man, I had something I was going to say. You were talking about the 12. Oh, one of the things, and I don't want to claim this to be anything from a scholarly point of view, but it's crossed my mind. This woman has been dealing with bleeding for 12 years. What if this was the girl's mother? After she gave birth to the daughter she was dealing with bleeding. No.
It could possibly be, but
probably not. But that has crossed my mind in the past.
Yeah, could possibly be. And, that wouldn't, I guess, speak very well of Jairus.
Yeah, right. Kill my daughter. Oh, ignore her. Come get my daughter. Yeah. I've heard it speculated that this woman may have been a Gentile. I don't know where they would have gotten that, but I've read a few places where they think maybe she was a Gentile. So probably wouldn't have been the girl's mother.
Yeah. So I mean, but it is interesting that could have been it, because you mentioned that that's the age that oftentimes they would have been married, and so that is interesting to think about as kind of a timeline of that ancient Near Eastern kind of rites of marriage and kind of the timeline of it, that it could have very well been a mother for sure. But as we think about this woman who is coming up to Jesus, I've always found it fascinating that she comes up and touches the fringe of his garment there in 44, and it's instantaneous. This her uncleanness is stopped. But there's a couple of things here that it's important, I think, in understanding the story. For one thing, she was considered ritually unclean. In other words, that meant that she would not be able to do things not only socially but religiously as well. she couldn't go places without kind of disclosing to people that she's unclean. She wouldn't have been able to take part in synagogue worship. And so, going all the way back to Leviticus, whenever you're looking at those laws for, uncleanness, she would have been somewhat ostracized because of this just constant bleeding, this constant hemorrhaging. But, I think too, just from a physical health standpoint, I'm no physician, but just the idea of what it would be like to be anemic and be kind of low on blood. When you have a constant flow of blood like that, you're probably going to be very weak. Probably not have much energy because you don't have as much of a blood supply as what your body needs. And so she's not only physically now she's emotionally drained, but also just spiritually outcast. And so when she has that, if she is to touch anybody according to the Levitical law, they too would become unclean, which is an important part of this story too, because she's in the midst of this crowd. And so technically everybody that she's touching to get to Jesus is unclean, so by Levitical law.
She's trying to hide it. That's exactly what happens. It's why when he asks about it, she doesn't say anything first. Because in verse 47, it says, the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling at his feet. So, it's like he called her out, and suddenly she's realizing, oh no, everybody that I've touched is going to realize that I've touched them.
Right.
And they're ceremonially unclean.
Right. Yeah, and it's, and something else that's always fascinated me about this story is almost the way that Jesus seems to question who it was and not just be able to, not necessarily be able to, but not point it out. Because I feel like he probably knew who it was, but this was an exercise that he was trying to get her to I guess come clean, if you will. No pun intended. But I think it was a sense of, it's not that he didn't know who she was, but rather he was trying to get her to own her faith and to kind of lay a public claim to her faith. Before she was trying to do this in secret, do it privately, do it so nobody knew. She could just receive the healing and then be clean and go about her business. But Jesus was like, no, that's the kind of faith that I want to put on display, because this is obviously a lot of faith. And so I don't think in any way it's Jesus rebuking her as much as it is Jesus trying to lift her up, elevate her, and let everybody know this is the kind of faith that you need to have, the kind of faith that this woman has.
Yeah. And I think that's why he made the point of saying that your faith has healed you. So everybody else could hear that.
Yeah.
So it talks about she touched the hem of his garment. I forget how my wording exactly was.
In verse 44.
Yes, touched the edge of his cloak. Now, in Jewish custom, and I guess it was Levitical law too, that their cloaks would have had a fringe, right? I don't know a whole lot about it. You may know better than I do, but the fringes were significant of something, weren't they?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Okay. I mean, I know there was they had something to do with the fringe of their garments and how I think they were supposed to keep them guarded. I'll have to go back, and I know I was reading something about it yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that they would have I can't remember the technical name for it, but the prayer tassels that would kind of hang.
Maybe that's what it was.
But I can't remember the fringe, the significance of the fringe.
Well, I have to go back and read it again, but I think it ended up being something where later in Jewish tradition, they ended up hiding, I guess, the tassels or whatever inside their garments so they wouldn't touch all these things. But it's possible this lady touched those tassels, the fringe of his garments, and that had something significant to do with her being unclean and then clean.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to go back and look further into for sure. But whenever this power does go out of Jesus, and this may be more interesting to our Western ears than somebody who may have lived in this time, but it's fascinating to me that Jesus has this physical sensation of power going out of him. It kind of gives a little bit of insight into, I guess Jesus, the way that Jesus felt or perceived whenever he was healing somebody. In other words, I mean, he could physically feel it. It wasn't just a matter of, him giving words and putting his hands on somebody and that person, receiving the healing and, being made whole and being able to feel the wholeness. But he too could feel in a visceral way power going out of his body, of his fleshly body, which I think is interesting to ponder and to think about, just how Jesus felt when he healed people.
Yeah. And so it makes you think, these days where he's healing all these people at once, it's like,
oh yeah, the physical exertion,
exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And so she comes to him, and I think it's interesting the language that Luke uses here, because it also comes up in I think in the previous story where the man is possessed by demons, but anyway, the people are afraid, and the woman here, after she receives the healing, she comes trembling, and I think it's maybe in Mark's synoptic gospel. He says fear and trembling, and so there's this sense of fear, and there's this theme of fear whenever somebody encounters the presence of God, and so I think that's significant too, that this woman is coming before him and having these emotions of fear to the point of trembling, and she falls down before him. And so kind of in the same humble way that Jairus did, that we just saw, she comes and falls down at his feet as well. So both of these stories that are, this sandwich narrative has these two characters humbling themselves, falling down at the feet of Jesus. And she, I guess isn't sure what to expect at this point. Maybe she's fearful because of all the people that she has had to touch to get to Jesus. Maybe she's fearful because she did this without asking. She just kind of, took it upon herself to do it. I don't know that she necessarily had a fear that he was going to reverse it. I can't imagine that would be part of her fear, because she had the faith that he could do it. I don't know that she would necessarily have been fearful that he would undo it, but I think she was afraid of the social ramifications of this. And it's interesting to think that Jesus doesn't address that. It's almost as if it's assumed that because she touched him as well, she would have also made him ritualistically unclean. But after the healing, all of a sudden she is made clean. Jesus is saying, I have power over this uncleanness. I'm not unclean. My holiness, my purity has now been given to you. And I think it's by implication that anybody in the crowd, don't worry about it. Like, this woman is healed. And so, he lifts not only the physical, uncleanness from her, but also just in the instance of a moment, all of a sudden makes her socially acceptable again and able to interact with people. And so it must have been a great experience for this woman to have.
You see it over and over again with Jesus, that there are several things that Jesus has done that would have made him unclean, but it never did. It's like anybody else these things happened to, they would have been ceremonially unclean. But Jesus himself, he's the one that's bringing the cleansing to everything else. And so all these things that, when Peter sees the animals, things like that, and he says, I won't eat them because they're unclean. And God says, whatever I've given you is clean out. Jesus is the one that's doing the cleansing in all of these, which, is something only God can do, which is interesting.
And, when it comes to this language that Luke uses and is kind of a constant use in the Gospel of Mark, especially. It's almost like Mark is in a hurry to get through the gospel story to get to kind of the crux of it. But Luke uses the word here. She had been immediately healed. And so there's this sense of for 12 years. The older I get, the longer it takes for my ailments to heal. Used to I get a scratch on my head and it's healed in a couple of days. Now it's like, this has been here for a week. Why is it? I can't imagine, something that has been going on for not only weeks, but months and years. And, trying all these things, going to all these physicians, getting all these different opinions, spending all your money trying to, heal this ailment. And then all of a sudden, just like that, it makes me wonder if that's what her expectation was, or if she just expected maybe a process of healing to begin, encountering Jesus, encountering God. But it was immediate. There wasn't a process. It was, you had this faith and you are now well. And I can't imagine the relief that she must have felt, but the language that he uses, you mentioned that line there that Jesus said, your faith has made you well. I think it's implied in the language that it's God who's doing the healing and it's the faith that brought her to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not necessarily her act of faith that is doing the healing. I think it's the faith in God that God is doing the healing.
Yeah.
In other words, if that makes sense. But it's interesting that Jesus uses this language, your faith has made you well. And the word that he uses there is the same word that he uses for you shall be saved in other parts of the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And also the same word that the apostles use whenever, they're spreading the good news in the book of Acts, this language of salvation. And so in this story, and in a lot of healing stories of Jesus, when he says that you have been made well, that is that's an indication of a physical being made well and also a spiritual saving, because it's the same exact word that is used, the word for made well and saved. And so there's this implication that this woman is physically healed, physically saved from her ailment, and spiritually made well and spiritually saved and able to, experience and fully interact with God and his people.
Interesting. Which kind of goes hand in hand with when he tells people that their sins have been forgiven.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, do we need to move on? We
kind
of do, don't we?
Yeah.
All right. So, verse 49. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. Your daughter is dead, he said. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were waiting and mourning for her. Stop wailing, Jesus said. She is not dead, but asleep. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. So while all this was going on, Jairus comes to Jesus, falls at his feet, and he's saying, hey, come to my house and heal my daughter. And then this lady comes up, and to him, it's almost like you're stealing the spotlight. Like,
all right.
You're distracting him. He's got to come save my daughter.
All right.
But then Jesus is doing all this. So makes you wonder if Jairus is like, come on.
Right. Yeah. Let's get on with it. What is this little woman doing? Yeah. Like, yeah, you may have been sick for 12 years, but my daughter literally died.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder too if he had patience. I think Jesus sensed in him that, there was this fear, and which is why he tries to calm him down for sure. But this language of death, and then Jesus kind of reclaiming it into she's not dead, she's just sleeping, is interesting, because obviously she everybody has verified this, that she's dead. They've done all the measures that they know to do, and for all intents and purposes, she's ready to be buried and put in the tomb. And so it is interesting that Jesus would have said, she's just sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that I think before they go in, before they go into the room,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes me wonder if it's almost like a setup, because that is a play on words that is used in the first century. You know, they've gone to sleep with their fathers,
Mm-hmm.
and even used in like, you know, thousands of years before.
Yeah.
That this particular king slept with his fathers or whatever, and Paul uses that kind of language, and so it's not like Jesus is lying. He's just using this metaphor before they go into the room, and it's almost as if he's setting up a way for them to fulfill what he instructs them, and that is, don't tell anyone what's happened. In other words, that before they go into the room, he's like, don't fear, she's just asleep. Let's go. But he only allows the parents and then his inner circle to come with him.
Mm-hmm.
And after the resurrection of the dead happens, then he tells them, go and tell no one. And because he said that before he went into the room, she's just sleeping. It's almost like he gives them a narrative to play off of. So the parents can be like, he was right. She was just asleep.
Yeah.
But Peter, James, and John, Jairus and his wife, they all knew what had happened. And it's fascinating because we don't really get insight into what a resurrection looks like in the event itself. In other words, Jesus is put into the tomb and he's resurrected, but we don't really get to see what happens in the tomb. Same with Lazarus. And so there's not many stories that you actually get to see that moment of when it happens. And it makes me wonder, if there's something special in particular that goes on that isn't meant for the masses to see, which is why only these 5 people are allowed in with Jesus. And so, they get to see something that many people don't get to see very firsthand witness of. And that is somebody literally coming back to life, getting the breath of life put back into them.
Yeah, verse 55, it says her spirit returned, which we may have talked about this before, but that word for spirit is breath.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it's also funny that the people were laughing at him. He said she's asleep, which it talks about just before that there were people wailing, which was a normal thing at that time. Was there were professional wailers or mourners, I guess, not wailers. They weren't like Moby Dick whalers.
All right.
But they basically stood outside and cried and stuff, which was a normal cultural thing at that time.
Yeah.
So Jesus was telling them, stop doing that.
Yeah.
She's just asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. And he uses this language again that he used in the previous story with the woman. He says, do not fear. And so they're kind of continuing this theme of fear of the unknown, fear of what is getting ready to happen, fear of what has happened because of Jesus being sidetracked. But he reassures them, do not fear. And he empowers them or encourages Jairus to have faith, to believe in what he wants to happen will happen. And so, he, again, just like he was elevating the faith of the woman, he's elevating the faith of Jairus and wanting to put this on display as this is the reason why this is going to take place, is because of your faith. And so Jairus does exactly that. He has faith. And so when they get there, exactly what Jesus said would happen happens. And man, I just can't imagine being in that room and seeing this lifeless body and the spirit returning to her and almost like this gasp of breath, and then something as human as could possibly be said, get her something to eat, she's probably hungry.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the reason why he said that was because the parents were just so astonished that they'd probably be in shock, and so he gives them something to do. He's like, here, get busy getting her something to eat, so you're not yelling or screaming and distracting everybody outside. Get busy doing something so you can get your mind off of what you just saw. So she's hungry.
And even after Jesus' resurrection, he's hungry and he
Yeah,
wants to eat.
yeah. Well, I've had a 12-year-old daughter, and they like to eat.
Yeah.
So she probably was hungry.
Yeah. And so it says something about, just the physical nature of her body, the physical nature of Jesus' body upon his resurrection, and just, there wasn't anything that had changed with the physicality of their body, even though this, spiritual, miraculous event has happened. They're hungry and they're getting ready to walk and do the things that they were doing before they died. And the parents obviously were amazed. There we see in verse 56. So, but then the messianic secret to close it out, he charged them to tell no one.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Like, I would want to tell everybody that I knew. But Jesus, it's not his time yet, and it's interesting because I don't think, if I recall, and you might be able to correct me, or somebody might be able to correct me, but whenever they had crossed the Sea of Galilee, and he heals the man with demons, he doesn't give that instruction to tell no one.
He tells them to go tell
Yeah,
everybody.
go tell everybody. And so, as he gets back into across the Sea of Galilee into the land where Jews are more prominent, more prevalent, where their expectations of what the Messiah is very much skewed, and so he's wanting to kind of pump the brakes on that, and so now that he's back in that region, he's like, all right, let's keep this on the down low and not tell anybody. So,
which, I mean, he couldn't avoid it with the woman that was dealing with the bleeding, because that was in front of a crowd of people.
yes.
But that also wasn't a resurrection of the dead. So,
right.
Yeah.
And also not something that was, I guess, obvious to the sight of the eyes.
Right. So this section kind of gives me a lot of, I don't know, vibes. It reminds me of a previous story we read about the centurion, both the sick woman and the dead girl, where you have somebody who's in charge of something, a high official has a sick or dead child. He came to Jesus when his daughter was sick, and a high official going to Jesus and saying, "Hey, I need you to help me or heal my child for me," which is both the centurion and the synagogue ruler. But then also the faith of the woman who just knew to touch his garment, and she knew she would be healed, where the centurion was like, "Hey, you don't even need to go to my house. I have faith that you can just say it and it's going to happen." And so it kind of mirrors that story too, which I find interesting.
Yeah. And so the challenge for us in stories like this, I think, Jesus is commending their faith, and it seems like a lot of times, the devil and his minions are trying to get us to doubt, get us to falter, and the challenge for us is to have the faith that everything is in God's hands, and everything will happen in God's timing, and our timing is not God's timing. His timing is eternal, and it's hard for us to fathom that, but to have the faith that God's got you, and whatever come what may today in your life, God's got you, and sometimes that can be tough to wait on God. Jairus, he literally thought that his daughter had died because God took his time getting there. But God's timing is not our timing, and so have faith, and God will take care of all things. So, well, I haven't seen any prayer requests come up in the comments, so we'll do a quick refresh to make sure. But if you have any last-minute prayer requests, then we can be prayerful for those. We mentioned one at the beginning, and I can't remember. I said we would be keeping them in our prayers.
Well, the Holloways had
some proper damage. That's right.
And then the Jonathan Fryer, his dad is in the hospital.
Okay.
He's on a ventilator. I think this was mentioned at church last night. His dad had some heart issues or something, so he got put on a ventilator, but keep him in our prayers. I guess his father lives here.
Okay.
But
All right.
Jonathan actually just lives down the street. He lives in my neighborhood.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we'll definitely keep his dad in our prayers for sure with uncertainty abounding. So, well, if there's nothing else, if you're watching this on playback later, feel free to comment or leave us a prayer request, and others that are watching this later can be in prayer about those as well. So, don't hesitate. So, let's go to God in prayer and we'll close it out. Father, we're thankful for another opportunity that we have to open your word and read stories like this of Jesus and just the life that he led, the people that he interacted with, the ones that came to him in just hopeless situations, and yet he infused them with hope. He infused them with life and healing and just power, your power. And we recognize that you have not stopped working in the life of your people. Help us to be image bearers of you in every interaction that we have. Please help us to bring healing to this broken world. Please help us to bring unity, bring love, and spread your joy to everyone we come in contact with. Want to lift up to you those who have encountered property damage because of storms, at least around this part of the country yesterday and last night. Be with the Holloways, as we know that they experienced some property damage, but we just ask that they're able to recoup everything that they've lost and be able to repair everything in a speedy manner. Be with those who just have trees, ton of branches down. Please be with them as they clean up, keep people safe as they're operating different kinds of equipment to help clean up, and just ask that you will help us to band together and also look to our neighbors who may be in need of help and look for opportunities to give them whatever they need. We ask that you will be with Jonathan Fryer's dad at this time as he's having serious health difficulties. It's scary whenever somebody is put on a ventilator, and we just ask that you will give him strength, give him healing. Be with Jonathan and his family as they look to take care of him, and help make decisions. Be with the doctors and nurses that are help guiding the decision making process. Give them wisdom, and we just ask that you will see his dad through this and heal him, and be with Jonathan and his family and comfort them during this time of uncertainty. Be with us as we go through this week. Be with at least Searcy Public Schools as they're entering their last full week of school. Be with teachers and students both as they're wrapping things up and closing things out. Please bless them and help everybody who it may be traveling this summer to have safe trips, whether it's for some short-term mission trips or vacationing, whatever this season of their life might bring. We just ask that you will bless us as we do look to the change of a season, and we're reminded of just your creative nature and the change of those seasons. And we're thankful for just the beauty of spring. We're thankful for the sunshine that we love to see, and just the blooming plants around us. And we're just reminded of how you take care of them, and you'll also take care of us. Please strengthen our faith whenever things aren't going the way that we would like them to, or the way that we think they should. Please help us to always look to you in times of trouble, but also when times are good, and help us to always seek your presence and seek to be led by your Spirit. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Hope to see you next time,
Yep.
Lord willing.
Sorry. Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Maybe.